I'm Brett Sokolow. On this 50th anniversary of Title IX, we have much to reflect on, much to celebrate, and much to prioritize to fulfill the goal of instilling gender equity throughout America's schools and colleges. The opportunity to address all of you today is a privilege that we greatly appreciate, and I hope that you recognize the unique and essential role that our members play in advancing gender equity across the United States. The Title IX Administrator is the hub around whom key efforts to realize the mandate of Title IX coalesce. I have had the honor of leading their primary industry association, ATIXA, the Association of Title IX Administrators, for the last 12 years. ATIXA's 8,600 members are more than functionaries. They are passionate change agents who inhabit highly politicized roles at the center of a cultural zeitgeist. They are frequently buffeted by forces, both internal and external, to their colleges, universities, schools, and districts, while trying to bring a balanced neutrality to their roles. The Title IX Administrator is victim-centered and a protector of due process. We rely on the Title IX Administrator to accommodate pregnant and parenting students. When LGBTQ+ rights are on the line, the Title IX Administrator is someone to turn to. When sexual assault, harassment, stalking, or dating violence interfere with educational opportunities, the Title IX Administrator is charged with restoring access and remedying on behalf of those who are harmed. I am honored to count Title IX administrators as my colleagues, to come together to celebrate Title IX with you today, and to have representatives of our field here to address you about their priorities and vision for advancing gender equity from their unique vantage points. Now let's please turn to Terry Lakowski to introduce our guests.
Thank you so much and welcome everyone. I am Terry Lakowski. I handle the government affairs for ATIXA. I'm so excited that we're here as a product of Title IX. This is such an important anniversary. And first, I just want to thank the Democratic Women's Caucus for joining us and supporting this event. We would not be here without them, and wholeheartedly thank you for your leadership, not only with this briefing, but what you do every day for us in Congress. And with that, I would like to welcome Congresswoman Chu to give some opening remarks. And Congresswoman, you have been such a champion of Title IX. And on behalf of all of us, I just want to thank you for the tireless work you've done in making this fight and world better for women and girls.
Well, I want to take my time to thank all of you, the Association of Title IX Administrators, for inviting me to speak with you today, but especially for all the work that you're doing to uphold Title IX, which is so important to women and girls all across this country. You are the ones that are on the front line of protecting all students from discrimination based on sex in sports. And it is so important for you to be able to do your job in the best way possible. And I'm particularly pleased to join you ahead of next Thursday, June 23rd, which marks the 50th anniversary of Title IX's passage into law. And I'm particularly enthused because of something that's special that's happening with Representative Patsy Mink. Title IX was introduced in Congress by Representative Patsy Mink, who is the Democrat from Hawaii, the first woman of color and first Asian American woman elected to Congress, who paved the way for greater gender and racial discrimination and fought hard for gender equality. Known as the mother of Title IX, she wrote the bill in part as a response to this discrimination she faced during her own education experience. The bill was even renamed the Patsy Takemoto Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act upon her passing. I'm pleased to share that next Thursday, Speaker Nancy Pelosi will unveil a portrait of Congressmember Mink for permanent display in the U.S. Capitol to honor this incredible pioneer. And I'd really like to thank Speaker Pelosi and Chair Zoe Lofgren, who worked so hard to honor Representative Mink's trailblazing legacy by making this historic portrait a reality. So the next time all of you walk through the U.S. Capitol, you will be able to see this icon of Title IX. So I am just proud to work with the Biden administration to continue Representative Mink's legacy and update Title IX to ensure that everyone feels safe in their educational environment. And that means protecting survivors of sexual assault on college campuses and trans athletes from discrimination and harassment. So thank you again to the Association of Title IX Administrators for convening this briefing, and of course to all the attendees participating today. I look forward to continuing our work together to ensure that every student from the classroom to the sports field and from kindergarten through college can learn, grow, and participate in educational and athletic environments free from sex-based discrimination, harassment, and violence.
Well, thank you so much, and we will certainly do our part to support you in those efforts. And I'm so glad you mentioned about Patsy Mink. Her legacy lives on in you, and we also will be hearing from Senator Hirono towards the end of our briefing today. And we're just so pleased to hear about the commemorative effort you guys are making on her behalf, and can't wait to get back in the Capitol and see it. I know we don't have the luxury of having you for the whole briefing, so I wanted to just ask you if you had any questions for our panelists before I know you have to go do the busy work you do on Capitol Hill.
Well, I just want to say I want to continue the work with you on the issues that you raise. So please be sure to talk to us if you think that there are issues that we need to follow up on with the Democratic Women's Caucus. And I certainly would be first there to make sure that we do something about it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We will certainly be taking you up on that. We appreciate it. And now we have another of one of your esteemed colleagues who also happens to be the representative for where ATIXA is headquartered, Congresswoman Dean, who has joined us. Congressman has been such a gracious leader in the new bill that we recently introduced together last week. And so, Congresswoman, would love to hear from you.
Well, good. I think it is afternoon. Good afternoon, Terry. Great to be with you. Terrific always to follow Judy Chu. She's just a colleague that I admire very, very much. And I'm so glad she lifted up the name of Representative Mink, the mother of Title IX. We have enjoyed celebrating and commemorating this 50th anniversary. I'm Madeline Dean. I'm Congresswoman for the 4th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. That's Montgomery and Berks counties. I am so glad to be here with you today as we continue to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Title IX, legislation that for half a century has worked toward education without discrimination. So thank you to our panelists, some of whom I know personally, Brett Sokolow, Cami Pratt, Belinda Guthrie, Sharon Perry Fantini, Shiwali Patel, and Terry, of course, our moderator. Thank you very much. Good to be with all of you. Something I wanted to focus on today is something that you all have helped me with. I wanted to briefly talk about an important piece of legislation that I introduced last week, HR 7980, Student Loan Deferment for Sexual Violence Survivors Act. The bill would establish a student loan deferment option for victims of sexual violence who temporarily withdraw from college to seek treatment and to focus on their mental and physical health. When an undergraduate or graduate student takes a leave after suffering such horror, they can be out for more than 6 months. And we all know how student loans work. The end of 6 months is the end of the so-called grace period and the beginning of loan repayments. So while a student is dealing with his or her unspeakable pain, they then must deal with student loan debt. It's disturbing, and it's time that greater protections be put in place for these students. You know, I come at this as a mother and a grandmother, but I was also a professor for 10 years at LaSalle University. I saw firsthand my students who had suffered sexual assault and how it affected them both personally and academically, sometimes seriously derailing their academic pursuits. And I was always sad for that. I'm grateful now that as a lawmaker, I can introduce such legislation that gives students the care and compassion they deserve. I'm grateful to you, the Association of Title IX Administrators, for working with me, helping me lift this piece of legislation and introduce it last week. Thank you for bringing the issue to my attention. As most of the people here today know, ATIXA, is in my district, in King of Prussia, right in my district. And together we've been working on this legislation since last year. I look forward to continuing to work on it, lift it, get co-sponsorship for it, and of course, get it passed. So I thank you very much for lifting this issue to us, working with my legislative team so that we could introduce the bill. I thank you too for the chance to be with you today, and I look forward to our continuing work. Thank you for the extraordinary, important work that you all do.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. We would not have been able to move this important piece of legislation without you, and we look forward to continuing to work side by side with you and your wonderful team to get this across the finish line. And we're also going to be speaking a little bit more about that legislation today as well. Before I get into that, I did want to give the opportunity to Congresswoman Cheryl to speak. I know you guys all have so many things that you do every day, and we are just so grateful that you've all taken the time to be with us for a few minutes. Congresswoman, you have also been such a great champion and leader on Title IX and women and girls issues for so long, and we would just love to hear from you as well today.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I actually know King of Prussia well, having been down there for several of my daughter's lacrosse tournaments. But it's wonderful to be on with all of you today. You know, Title IX for women in my generation has had such a huge and apparent impact as we look around, especially in the area of sports. So as somebody who went to the Naval Academy and entered on the 10-year anniversary of when women first entered into the Academy, we had less than 10% of the class who graduated was made up of women. You can imagine that I have been focused on issues of you know, gender equity in academics, and Title IX has had such a huge impact there. And we were able in the House Armed Services Committee to move, and this is kind of a niche thing, move sexual assault cases out of the chain of command, which I think will help at the academies, or service academies at least, in supporting women in that area. But something else I've been working on is equity in sports. And I will tell you that I was recently looking at a picture of my first soccer team. And just to give you a sense of the difference of what my experience, I started soccer in 4th grade, and I now have a 10-year-old who is on a soccer team. She's been playing since kindergarten. I look at this picture and I turned to my mom and I said, what the heck is going on here? I was wearing jeans and an Oxford shirt with my soccer shirt over it. And the dads looked kind of remarkably similar. I don't think any of the dads had ever played soccer because that was just not a sport in our area of the country. They had played, you know, maybe baseball or football or basketball. And that was kind of my soccer experience. I like to think it got a little more professional-ish. You know, we did have some socks, not just t-shirts, but socks on some of my teams. But I look at my daughter, who now has the same type of coaching as my son. I have 2 daughters and 2 sons. My daughters now have the same level of coaching as my sons. And the competitiveness on the field and the level of play is truly amazing to me to watch them. And they get better and better and better. And it is so wonderful to see, because I also will tell you that for years I've heard from my business community about how team sports is so helpful in business, how understanding how to get along, how to compete, but also kind of get along at the end of the day is so incredibly important as people move into their jobs. The connections. You know, we used to call it the Naval Academy. We used to call lacrosse the Long Island Scholarship Fund because that's where all our lacrosse players came from. But just the connections you build through sports and the growth opportunities that they offer to you. So because of that, we have been so lucky. And I see in my daughter and the opportunities that she has, in my 16-year-old and the recruitment that she is experiencing from different colleges, I see the dedication of women for 50 years across the country working in Congress to make sure that discrimination is banned in our public schools. Title IX was a result of their efforts. And this year, in celebrating 50 years, I can tell you that I directly see the results as I look at my children. I'm a huge supporter. So when I think back, for the first time after years of watching football with my dad and not being, quite frankly, that interested. I remember for the first time watching the women's national soccer team win the 1999 Women's World Cup. And many of you might remember Brandy Chastain whipping off her jersey in that iconic moment. And I will tell you, I felt a connection to that moment that I had never before experienced. So when I see that and when I feel that connection, it speaks to me on the fact that there is so much growth opportunity still for women in sports. So from addressing inequality in math and science to preventing sexual assault on campus, Title IX works to ensure that we have equality in every aspect of our children's education. However, despite these tremendous gains during the past 5 decades, many colleges and universities have really fallen short of Title IX, leaving many women struggling for equal footing on the sports field or on the basketball court, for example. So in the 2021 NCAA tournament, the top women's teams took videos, as many of you know, probably all of you, from their inadequate weight room. Think of your weight room in your average motel, and that's probably it, compared to the elaborate facilities that we saw the men's team have. That was just one viral example. More egregiously, the women weren't even allowed to use the phrase March Madness to describe their tournament. They had fewer teams in NCAA-sponsored postseason basketball events, and they saw a dismal level of promotions and advertisements in comparison to those for the male athletes. And we know that those advertisements were actually offered to the women and refused. So that's why in Congress, I'm working to break more barriers and fight for more progress to carry on the legacy of those who fought for Title IX in the first place. I was proud to introduce the Gender Equity in College Sports Commission Act, legislation that would create a commission to comprehensively examine the NCAA's failure to provide gender equity in college athletics and issue recommendations to Congress on the reforms the NCAA must make to finally ensure that equity. For years, the NCAA has commissioned its own reports while evading real transparency. And this will provide the needed oversight and accountability to create real change. Following last year's exposure of the poor facilities and conditions, I introduced a resolution emphasizing that the NCAA is subject to Title IX and its inequitable provisions of services at that tournament was a clear violation of the letter and the spirit. After that letter, I spoke to NCAA President Mark Emmert, talking about the problems that I had with it. And we are still pushing for more change there. So we'll continue to push on this legislation. And we've heard about the great Representative Mink, the pioneer and sponsor, the mother of Title IX. And she said, we have to build things that we want to see accomplished in life in our country based on our own personal experiences to make sure that others don't have to suffer that same discrimination. So I'm going to be committed to continuing on with the baton of Congresswoman Mink and pursuing the goal of equity in education on the basketball court and in the halls of Congress. So I just want to thank this organization so incredibly much for all that you do to make equity and gender equity a reality. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman. We really appreciate your enthusiasm. And I do want to mention that ATIXA has wholeheartedly endorsed all of your bills, and we will continue to support your efforts. And as someone who played college basketball and has a daughter who I'm now coaching on her 3-year-old soccer team, well, I would definitely not call what I coach competitive. I really appreciate your continued efforts and leadership to pave the way for my daughter's generation as well. I also wanted to recognize we're joined by another member of Congress. So many incredible, powerful women coming on to speak. We love it. Congresswoman Ross, I don't know if you just wanted to give a wave, or we would love for you to say a few remarks if you would also like to say hello.
Hello, I didn't expect to be speaking with you, but I'm thrilled to be with you. I'm thrilled about this anniversary. I'm thrilled about the exceptional work that our Secretary of Education is doing on Title IX, on repairing Title IX, and my good friend Suzanne Goldberg, I know, is helping with those regulations. We met the first day of college, and we couldn't have a better person to move Title IX forward and save us from where we've been. I've done so much work on women's rights and gender issues. Also very interested in helping pregnant and parenting students who frequently fall behind and are discriminated against in our not just our colleges and universities, but sometimes in our high schools, actually more in our high schools. And this is something that I've worked on for decades, but I'm just so glad that we have people of goodwill and good spirit who want to make sure that Title IX lives up to its promise and that it cannot be derailed, even for short periods of time, because women just won't have anything to do with that. So thank you for all you do. So happy to be with you.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us and for your continued leadership on these important issues. Now let's talk about these issues. I would like to turn it back over to our president, Brett, to introduce our esteemed speakers and get into the nuts and bolts of all that ATIXA does.
Yeah, I'm excited to do that, Terry, and thank you to all of the members of Congress who have had an opportunity to address our members today. We really thank you for being here. While I have you, I want to make an ask. Some of you had an opportunity to hear Congresswoman Dean introduce the student loan deferment bill. That is a wonderful way, I think, to celebrate Title IX's 50 years and to provide an incredible opportunity for those students who need to take a break from college for some period of time, but face student loan repayment indebtedness. And so this bill would give an opportunity for greater extended deferments for those individuals. And this is a fix to a gap in current federal regulations. So we've just introduced the bill, and we are hopeful that we will have many co-sponsors going forward. And if any of you are able to commit to co-sponsoring the bill, we would greatly appreciate your support. You need not do so here today, but if you'd like to make that gesture and see if you can get other members of Congress on board along with you, we are thrilled to have you and to have your support. At this point, I want to turn to some of our panelists from ATIXA, and we have a wonderful cross-representation of our membership, individuals from community colleges, from four-year institutions, from K-12 school districts, who are each going to speak to various aspects of Title IX in commemoration of its 50th, but also looking forward to what Title IX can accomplish in its next 50 years. I want to call on first Cami Pratt. Cami is a longtime member of our association through various institutions. She is now the Chief Title IX Officer for the Chicago Public Schools, one of the largest school districts in the country. It's a big lift, and she has enormous insights that are incredibly valuable to share about her experience with Title IX, the Chicago Public Schools experience, and I want to invite Cami to address all of those present here today. Thank you for being here, Cami. It's good to see you.
Great, good to see you too, Brett. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, members of Congress, congressional staff, ATIXA, and my fellow ATIXA members. As Brett said, I'm Cami Pratt. I'm the Chief Title IX Officer for Chicago Public Schools. Chicago Public Schools is the third largest school district in the country, serving over 340,000 students in 646 schools and employing nearly 36,000 people. The 2020 regulations place an undue burden on schools as they are prescriptive and take away the administrative discretion necessary to act quickly and to ensure safety and to achieve a fair and healing result for all parties. The complex rules around formal complaints, notice, and dismissals are confusing to recipients and to the parties. The rules are not reflective of other civil rights case processes, nor do they promote healing for both of the involved parties. We hope for updated regulations that return discretion to schools to exercise sound judgment and determine procedures applicable to the resolution of sexual and gender-based harassment and violence. The current regulations create confusion between state education codes and federal obligations that makes it nearly impossible for K-12 schools to comply with all of the various applicable standards. Invoking federal supremacy does not resolve the issues. Conflicting provisions arise not directly from the regulations themselves, but from the preamble interpreting the regulations, which does not preempt state law. Tangentially, strong federal guidance is needed to navigate the interaction of Title IX and Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA. The process under the Title IX regulations does not align with IDEA, leaving recipients on their own to reconcile both of these very important laws. In addition to legislative clarity, there needs to be more awareness and investment, as well as technical assistance and professional development within training requirements for Title IX team roles. Having the Title IX coordinator take on the role of training not only for their team members, but also for administration, boards of education, students, parents, faculty, and staff is an enormous burden. The burden is not funded, and most in the K-12 arena do not have the historical knowledge to effectively accomplish this requirement. While I am proud to say that Chicago Public Schools has been a leader in operationalizing Title IX in the K-12 space, I know that more is needed across the country to keep our children safe. The regulations focus on responding to complaints rather than prevention of discrimination. We must engage in prevention education and awareness to provide educational environments that are free of sex and gender-based discrimination. Largely response-focused regulations disproportionately demand all of the resources, leaving no funds dedicated to providing prevention efforts for students and employees. Moving forward, we need legislative solutions for flexibility and promoting a process that is expeditious, that is fair, and that is healing. We also need a prioritization of funding for prevention efforts to fully realize the vision of every child in every neighborhood having access to a safe and supportive school environment. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. That concludes my remarks.
Cami, it's hard to represent all of K-12 and encapsulate that in just 5 minutes, but I think you've done the field proud and really addressed some of the critical issues that our K-12 members are facing. So thank you so much for your comments on that and for being willing to participate today. Next, I would like to introduce Belinda Guthrie. Belinda is our second panelist. She is the Assistant Vice President for Institutional Equity and the Title IX Coordinator at Vassar College. Belinda is a longtime ATIXA member and founding member, as well as a member of our advisory board. We've had a long time association with her across various institutions, and the quality of her work speaks for itself. It's one of the reasons why we thought it was so important for her to be able to address this panel today. Belinda, please.
Thank you, Brett. As Brett shared, my name is Belinda Guthrie, and I'm the Assistant Vice President for Institutional Equity at Vassar. I want to express my gratitude to the Democratic Women's Caucus for being here today and for sponsoring this event with ATIXA. Today, I offer my personal perspective on the importance of the loan deferment bill introduced last week by Representative Dean. I am sure it does not surprise you to hear that studies continue to show that at least 1 in 5 US women and 1 in 8 men, in addition to that, 1 in 4 trans or gender nonconforming students are sexually assaulted as undergraduates. Equally troubling, 63% of women and men report experiencing sexual harassment while in college. Within this population, we also know that survivors of sexual violence are at greater risk for developing long-term psychiatric conditions, including depression, PTSD, and anxiety disorders. Having worked as a Title IX coordinator for almost 20 years, I have seen firsthand the impact of trauma and the profound and insidious consequences on mental health of sexual violence survivors. A growing body of research has also demonstrated that the psychiatric impact of sexual violence can be so debilitating that a disproportionate number of students seek a leave of absence from their academic program, and an estimated 34% of sexual assault survivors drop out of college. We know that mental health and psychosocial well-being are inextricably linked to students' overall academic success. We also know that it is also linked to the likelihood of their completing a degree. We know that healing takes time. There are many loan deferments for students who take time away from their education for reasons such as a graduate fellowship, participation in a vocational rehabilitation program, for economic hardship, and for military service. As Representative Dean shared, most federal loans have a 6-month grace period, and during this time, the lenders treat the borrower's loans as if the student were still enrolled in school full-time. But at the end of that 6-month grace period, the student is required to enter repayment on their loan until they return to school. Presently, nothing is in place to support victims of sexual violence who need more time to regain their health and to restart their lives. Student survivors across the country look to their schools. They look to their Title IX coordinator to help them find a path forward. Congress should eliminate one unnecessary barrier to academic access and success by creating a federal financial aid repayment exception for victims of sexual violence. This deferment should be more than just for a period of 6 months. It should be up to a period of 1 year. We need to afford survivors the time to heal. I also want to share that support for this bill also offers a critical opportunity to help reframe the pervasive narrative of shame and failure that many students feel when taking time away from their studies to seek mental health treatment. This bill sends a clear message that taking time to recover is a decision that demonstrates strength, and importantly, this decision can be made without fear of financial consequences. For those of you here today, as well as for all of the members of the Democratic Women's Caucus, we have a responsibility to ensure that student survivors do more than simply survive. It is incumbent upon us in the spirit of Title IX to create opportunities for them to thrive. Thank you for your time. I very much appreciate this opportunity.
Belinda, thank you for your comments and for all of your advocacy that has helped us to get this bill to its present state of introduction. Many of you know that Title IX coordinators try to comply with Title IX's expectations every single day, and they'll comply with Title IX whether there's loan deferment or not. So as we looked at what we could do as an association to really make an impact, especially on the 50th anniversary of Title IX, the passion of our members that I mentioned in my introductory statement became clear. They pushed this to the attention of ATIXA's leadership. ATIXA's pushed it then to Congress and to the Department of Education to see what could be done. And we think that if this bill can make it through to passage this year in the next legislative session, that we will be doing something for victims and survivors that is a monumental shift toward their completion, their success, their ability to fully participate in the educational programs of institutions of higher education across the United States. We couldn't have done this without support and really the catalysts for this change from members like Belinda. So thank you for being here today to represent that perspective. I now want to introduce Sharon Perry-Fancini. Sharon is the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Iowa State University. She is also an ATIXA Advisory Board member and a longtime member and friend of ATIXA. We have worked with Sharon across many institutions and have been thrilled to see her career trajectory, giving her a catbird seat on perspectives that I know she will share today in terms of how Title IX is impacting in the higher education space. Sharon, thank you for being with us. Please continue.
First, I just want to give you offer a sincere appreciation for us to have this opportunity to have this this important conversation. So the pressures in politics of being a Title IX coordinator within an institution of higher education can be overwhelming and undermining. According to research, the amount of responsibility that falls under the scope of the Title IX coordinator in the 2020 regulations has led to increased challenges, concerns with retention, mental health, and training. Our support for the Gender Equity in Education Act, which was introduced by Senator Hirano and Representative Matsuni, would provide additional resources, training, and technical support to combat harassment and discrimination in education. The bill seeks to create the Office of Gender Equity within the U.S. Department of Education and to coordinate Title IX activities within the department and throughout other federal agencies, fund competitive grants for K-12, colleges and universities, states, school districts, and other educational organizations to enhance Title IX compliance programs and provide Title IX coordinators with annual training, information, and most importantly, both best practices about Title IX compliance. We recommend for Congress to act to protect Title IX from the cycle of being re-regulated every 4 to 8 years as different political parties assume their elected positions. Title IX has unfortunately become a political swing as a result of that. As a practitioner, we ask, we seek, and we need clear and consistent guidelines in order to provide welcoming institutions where all participants have the opportunity to fully participate. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. And it just can't be reiterated enough that the cycle that we have been experiencing as a field of new regulation, new law, changing guidance every few years has many members of our field fatigued. And we're erstwhile. We're trying as best we can to comply, and it takes a while to get good at something. And so with the rules changing all the time, it really inhibits our ability to bring excellence to our practice that all of us, I know, as members of ATIXA, hold as some of the highest values that we bring to our professional responsibilities. So I can't say enough about your decision to highlight the need to insulate and for Congress to act to insulate Title IX from the constant regulation and re-regulation and guidance process that has given us shifting sands for at least the last dozen years, if not more. Our final member of our panel today is Shivali Patel. We're thrilled to have Shivali with us, and she is the Director of Justice for Student Survivors and Senior Counsel for the National Women's Law Center. ATIXA has a long-standing relationship with the NWLC, and we value and prize the collaborative opportunities that we've had with them across the years, including recently working together to support the Gender Equity in Education Act that Sharon mentioned. We are excited to share our panel today with somebody from the NWLC, and very glad that Shivali had offered offered to come and present on behalf of her organization. Shivali, please.
Thank you, Brett. Good afternoon, and thank you to the Democratic Women's Caucus and ATIXA for inviting me to speak at this event. As Brett mentioned, I work at the National Women's Law Center, and I come to this work, focusing on advocacy for student survivors a couple of decades after I was a student advocate myself, fighting for protections against campus sexual assault. And now I'm a civil rights attorney overseeing the National Women's Law Center's work addressing protections for survivors. NWLC was founded in 1972, actually the same year that Title IX was passed. So we're also turning 50 this year. And since then, we have been advocating for robust Title IX protections for students through federal policy advocacy to litigation and administrative enforcement. And even though Title IX is just 37 words long, as you heard from the speakers so far, it's a broad in purpose and scope. And so now we're also working to ensure that the Department of Education fulfills Title IX's promise as a broad civil rights law by restoring and solidifying protections for student survivors. So earlier you heard about the Title IX rule changes that were promulgated by the Trump administration in 2020 and the burdens that it placed on schools and the confusion that it has caused for schools, and also students and families. And I cannot underscore enough how harmful these rule changes have been for survivors. As Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos rolled back Title IX protections that have been in place for decades by, among other things, allowing schools to ignore harassment that doesn't fit a narrow definition, or ignore harassment based on where it occurred, even if the student has to share a class with their assailant and is facing the same, trauma and triggers that anyone would, regardless of where they were assaulted. And these changes ultimately were designed to actively prevent schools from taking steps to address sexual harassment and to discourage students from reporting by imposing hostile and burdensome and unfair grievance procedures. Indeed, at the time, the Department of Education trumpeted that the greatest cost savings from the rule would be that schools would have to conduct fewer investigations. And these changes are particularly harmful for women and girls of color, LGBTQI+ students, and disabled women and girls, as they're more likely to experience harassment, but also more likely to be ignored, disbelieved, punished, and pushed out of school entirely because of stereotypes that cast them as less credible. And even before these rule changes went into effect, we at the National Women's Law Center were hearing from students across the country who were sexually harassed and then further harmed by their school's response or retaliation by their abusers. This includes punishment after reporting harassment. One trend that we have seen that's very common, but that has not gotten enough attention, is how far too many student survivors have been disciplined for violating a school rule during the incident, such as a rule against drug or alcohol use, or engaging in sexual activity, or against physical fighting when they were defending themselves. Other student victims have been disciplined for missing school in the aftermath of harassment to avoid seeing their harasser, or for making an allegedly false report just because the school didn't find that harassment occurred after doing an investigation. And so the National Women's Law Center, at NWLC, I've worked on cases representing student survivors who have been punished and pushed out of school. And this includes one student who, when she was 14 years old and a student in one of the largest school districts in the country, she was sexually assaulted multiple times within the school within a couple of weeks. And when the school found out, she was interviewed by a school police officer who didn't believe her, and she felt coerced into recanting. And then ultimately the school chose to suspend her with her 3 assailants. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that these responses only further silence survivors and deter students from reporting sexual harassment when it's already so underreported. Another thing I wanted to mention was the retaliation by abusers. So it's something that we're also been hearing more and more about, is an increase in retaliation by abusers, so students who've abused others or faculty who've abused students, through the filing of retaliatory Title IX cross complaints against their victims or defamation suits. And this not just harms and silences victims who've already spoken out, but it chills further reporting as survivors are shown the cost of reporting is just too high to bear. And this is why we need a strong Title IX rule as soon as possible that restores protections for survivors, but also clarifies protections against retaliation. And as you all may know very well, the rulemaking process is extremely long, and it begins with the publication of an NPRM, the Notice of Public Rulemaking, which triggers the public notice and comment period. And that's when the administration would show its proposed rule to the public, to all of us, to you, to be able to view what they propose and submit comments suggesting changes to the rule. And so while the Biden administration held public hearings on Title IX about a year ago, I think exactly a year ago, probably starting around June 7th or so last year, we have yet to see a proposed rule. Students in middle school through college, they're protesting across the country, demanding that their schools meaningfully address sex-based harassment. They are in desperate need of Title IX school protections. And through Title IX rulemaking, this is also an opportunity for the Biden administration to clarify Title IX protections for LGBTQI+ youth who experience widespread discrimination in schools and are facing unprecedented attacks from state lawmakers and officials across the country who have enacted laws and policies banning students from school restrooms and sports, and even censoring discussion of their very existence. So while we have much to celebrate for Title IX's 50th anniversary on June 23rd, we have yet to see an NPRM, and our hope is that the department will issue an NPRM by then as part of their promise to end sex discrimination in education. And finally, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what Congress can do to protect student survivors. Over the years, damage has been done to protections under Title IX by courts that impose barriers and limit access to justice for student survivors. These barriers create standards for Title IX sexual harassment lawsuits that are more burdensome than standards applicable to workplace sexual harassment under Title VII. So today, in a lawsuit, Title IX plaintiffs have to establish that they were subjected to severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive harassment, that the school had knowledge of the harassment by a high-ranking school official, and that the school was deliberately indifferent to the harassment or clearly unreasonable. But under Title VII, a plaintiff who is harassed by a coworker or a non-supervisor need only show that their employer reacted negligently in response to severe or pervasive harassment of which the employer knew or should have known. This all results in schools having to do less to address harassment against their students than the same harassment of its employees. And not only that, but these Title IX limitations have been mirrored in protections against race-based and national origin-based harassment under Title VI and protections against disability-based harassment under Section 504. And so moving forward, we need Congress to fix the burdensome standards that have come out of these courts and ensure that Title IX is consistent with the broad mandate of what Title IX was always intended to be, and to ensure that a fix would be across all related statutes so that students who are experiencing intersectional forms of harassment that may be sexual but also racialized or also based on their disability are not subjected to different and conflicting standards in lawsuits. And finally, and to a point that was made earlier, solidifying protections in the statute itself would also ensure that schools are not having to change their policies every 4 to 8 years through re-regulation based on changes to the administration. I know we are at this historic moment celebrating Title IX's 50th anniversary and the progress that has come with it. And there has been a lot of progress and much to celebrate. But there's also a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that Title IX's purpose is fulfilled, not only by schools, but also by the administration and Congress. And so thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Shwali. You are an eloquent spokesperson for the issues that we all care very, very much about. We have an opportunity now to engage in Q&A with our audience. We're very much looking forward to that. You all have the opportunity to use the raise hand function. Once you raise your hand, we can unmute you, you can unmute yourself and participate in interaction with our panel today for whatever questions that you wish to ask. Hopefully those that are topical to the 50th anniversary of Title IX and some of the topics that we have talked about already, and we're happy to expand further. Are there members, and I see we have 230 participants at this time. Are there members amongst our 230 who would like to ask questions of the panel? Just give a moment to see if anybody would like to weigh in. Alicia Carter-Harris, I see your hand is raised. You may join our conversation. How are you?
Thanks, Brett. I'm well. How are you today?
Good to see you.
So my name is Alicia Carter-Harris. I am a consultant with TNG, a risk management firm for educational institutions. And I was wondering, over the past decade, the rules and expectations governing Title IX have been subject to the whim of the executive branch, as many of our panelists have spoken about today. Legislative action on Title IX could provide more stability and better results. Do you believe there is any chance for legislative solutions to Title IX question? If so, what might that solution look like?
Who amongst our panelists would like to take first shot at that big question? And I think it is a big question, right? We have to ask, are we trying to nibble away at Title IX's weaknesses with bills like the GEA and the loan deferment bill? Or is it time for Congress to put some bedrock principles into a statute that's more than 37 words long that will still give the Department of Education and other agencies regulatory opportunities, but protect the field from these incredibly wide swings that we see in terms of practice. And while it's hard, I think, to assess whether there's a will in Congress to rewrite Title IX or to amend it in a substantial way, it very much is our hope that that our lawmakers recognize that what Title IX is capable of accomplishing can't be accomplished in the current environment because it has become a political football or a political swing. And so while I don't think we could ever insulate Title IX completely from the political process, I do think that there has to be a way through legislative initiatives to narrow the range and to give, I think you used the term before, a bedrock, a solid foundation of practice to the field. And my hope, especially as we look at the possibility that new regulations are coming from the Department of Education imminently, that there will be some return to flexibility, that we've seen a very prescriptive approach taken by the Trump administration, and that we will move toward a set of rules that allow the practitioners in the field to achieve best practices. It's one of the conversations we have at ATIXA all the time is, we know what the floor is. The floor is compliance. We know what's expected of us. A lot of us would like to do better than the floor, and the current regulations really inhibit our ability to do so. And so we're hopeful, either through legislative action or through the regulatory process, that Congress restores to those who really know schools best, right? The practitioners here on this call, the ability to use our experience, our wisdom to determine the specifics of how we comply with Title IX in our schools and districts. Shawali, I see your hand is up. Would you like to weigh in?
Sure, thank you. And I know I had talked about this towards the end of my remarks. I mean, I do think that this is an opportunity, given that we are at the 50th anniversary and the changes that have been happening over the last decade, through the administration, whether it's through guidance and rescinded guidance and then regulation, and now we're having a change in regulations. I know Brett and ATIXA has been very clear about the need for stability and how that would also, how that would be really helpful for everyone to ensure that, the process is going by smoothly and as effectively as possible. And I also think this is an opportunity, given that, again, as I mentioned earlier, the courts over the last few decades have really created standards that are so burdensome for students, much more than for employees who experience workplace harassment and are bringing civil rights complaints under Title VII. And, I think it's, the perverse effect of it is that it requires then students, often young people, to have to suffer through something that's more severe, more pervasive, in order to get some sort of justice in the courts. And this has all happened despite the prevalence of sexual harassment being so high. Earlier, as mentioned, at least 1 in 5 undergraduate women experience sexual assault, right? So, and then for LGBTQI plus students, disabled students, students of color, it's higher. And that number, that 1 in 5 to 1 in 4 number, has been consistent for decades. There was a survey done in the early 1980s by Mary Koss that showed, through her survey, I think it was 1 in 4 undergraduate women.
I'm so sorry to interject.
Oh, sorry.
I know we can all talk about this for so long, but we do have a wonderful video from Senator Hirono that I wanted to have an opportunity to share with everyone. So if we could go to that video, and then Brett will share a few closing remarks after that video.
Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Senator Mazie Hirono, and I'm pleased to join you today as we celebrate 50 years of Title IX and the work you all do every day to advance gender equity in education. 50 years ago this month, Hawaii's own Patsy Mink, the first woman of color elected to Congress, led the charge to get Title IX passed into law. In doing so, she opened countless doors for women in sports, in the classroom, and beyond. Today, 50 years later, we can proudly celebrate the success of those who came before us and those continuing to pave the way. But while we have come a long way, we still have a long way to go to reach true equity. Whether it be not allowing transgender girls to play on their school's soccer team, not providing necessary accommodations for pregnant students, or not supporting survivors of sexual assault or harassment, too many individuals still experience gender discrimination in school. And we know this gender discrimination disproportionately impacts women, girls, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and people of color. Which is why your work to provide Title IX training for coordinators, investigators, and administrators is so critical. And I want you to know that you can count on me to be a steadfast partner in the Senate as we continue this fight. Last year, I reintroduced the Patsy T. Mink and Louise M. Slaughter Gender Equity in Education Act. Our bill would establish an office for gender equity within the U.S. Department of Education to provide support for states, school districts, colleges and universities, and K-12 schools to help fully implement Title IX. With your help, that's exactly what we are doing. Mahalo. Aloha.
So great to have words from Senator Hirono today as well. And we thank her for recording that message to us and reminding us how important her bill, the Gender Equity in Education Act, is. I want to close with a thank you to the Democratic Women's Caucus so much for hosting and co-sponsoring with ATIXA today. A thank you to Terry and her team at Active Policy Solutions for helping us to pull this together, our team at ATIXA. A special thank you to all of our panelists and from the National Women's Law Center as well for joining us and adding to the richness of voices that we have here today. My final words will simply be a call to action, that all of our members approach your members of Congress, senators, congressmen and women, and ask them please to co-sponsor the loan deferment bill, to join Congresswoman Dean, and to help in sponsoring ultimately passage of the Gender Equity in Education Act. With those two bills through Congress and signed by President Biden, we will have a vastly different lay of the land for Title IX going forward. We'll have funding and support. We will have advancement of training and the prevention initiatives that we've talked about today. We'll have relief for survivors from loan indebtedness for a period of time that lets them get back on their feet and re-achieve the access to their education. Because at the end of the day, that's what Title IX is all about. It's ensuring that access to education on the basis of sex or gender is not facing barriers that can't be surmounted. And it is, I think, largely up to the members of ATIXA to make sure that we dismantle those barriers and that we open access and that we do that not only through our practices each day in our schools and our campuses, but that we do so through our activities like the briefing today to encourage Congress to take action that we as members can't take individually, but collectively can help to bring to pass. I want to also thank all of the members who showed up today, more than 250 registrants who participated. We hope this briefing has been valuable for you. The recording will be available to you going forward if you'd like to show it to others from your schools and campuses. And again, just a lovely thank you to all the panelists who shared their voices today and were part of this very important opportunity. Happy anniversary, Title IX. We look forward to celebrating from now through the 23rd, which is the actual date of passage of the law, and working collaboratively to envision the the future of Title IX and how we will build on the past 50 years with 50 plus more years of steadfast improvement in access to education, irrespective of gender and sex, but importantly inclusive of the rights of those individuals to ensure that their education is not disrupted by the many actions of discrimination that we've talked about here today. So I think we're at closing time, and again, it has been a pleasure to share this opportunity with you and with our members of Congress who were here today. Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Senator Mazie Hirono, and I'm pleased to join you today as we celebrate 50 years of Title IX and the work you all do every day to advance gender equity in education. 50 years ago this month, Hawaii's own Patsy Mink, the first woman of color elected to Congress, led the charge to get Title IX passed into law. In doing so, she opened countless doors for women in sports, in the classroom, and beyond. Today, 50 years later, we can proudly celebrate the success of those who came before us and those continuing to pave the way. But while we have come a long way, we still have a long way to go to reach true equity. Whether it be not allowing transgender girls to play on their school's soccer team, not providing necessary accommodations for pregnant students, or not supporting survivors of sexual assault or harassment, too many individuals still experience gender discrimination in school. And we know this gender discrimination disproportionately impacts women, girls, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and people of color. Which is why your work to provide Title IX training for coordinators, investigators, and administrators is so critical. And I want you to know that you can count on me to be a steadfast partner in the Senate as we continue this fight. Last year, I reintroduced the Patsy T. Mink and Louise M. Slaughter Gender Equity in Education Act. Our bill would establish an office for gender equity within the U.S. Department of Education to provide support for states, school districts, colleges and universities, and K-12 schools to help fully implement Title IX. With your help, that's exactly what we are doing. Mahalo. Aloha.